Hello, Deep Mindfulness Collective. This right here, right now, is the joy of being a live stream coming to you live from Brooklyn, New York. If you're joining us anywhere other than twitch.tv/deepmindfulness, well, you're in the wrong place. You know, I'm starting to think and realize that perhaps I don't even need to say that last part anymore because we're only broadcasting on twitch.tv/deepmindfulness. And folks, very, very excited to have you here. Welcome, folks, as we begin to trickle in. Good times as always. So, where are we? Excited for today's meditation. Excited for our guest here. I got rid of the old plant. I replaced it with this new plant, which, as everyone knows, I have a large warehouse of identical plants. Each one has a different name alphabetically, which means there's a lot of plants. And so today I pulled out the one named Deb. Welcome, folks. So where are folks coming from? Where doth be? Brooklyn in the house. Folks, where are you coming from? Where on earth are you? My dog is whining. I think it wants to come on the stream. Babe?
Yes?
Would you bring the dog? Nick, welcome. Barely got here, but turning in from Karlstad, Sweden. Lovely to have you here, Nick. As always, thank you for your presence. Tamalin from India, welcome. Nice to see you all the way from the other continent here. Oh, look at what we have. We have Sela from Brooklyn. Sela from Brooklyn in the house. Yep, that's the microphone. That's right. Do you know how to run a live stream, Sela? Do you know how to do that? Yep, that's right. Yep. Okay, now just talk in. Yeah, you got the position correct. Now just say live from Brooklyn, New York. This is the joy of being a live stream. Come on. Just say the words, goddammit. Okay, we'll work on it, Sela. We'll work on it. Oh, poing. That was more of a collapse than a handoff. Okay. We have here with us Jean from Brooklyn. Welcome. Nice to see you here in the neighborhood virtually. Hello from Pittsburgh. Ruben 320. Nice to have you. Great to have little Pittsburgh in the house. Annie from Topanga. Welcome. Nice to see you here on the stream, as always. Folks, excited for today. We are going to be jumping into something that we actually dipped into on the last live stream a little bit. I think we're going to focus a little bit more on that today, which is this task. We've talked about this multiple self model, but I'll give the briefest of summaries in order to explain. But basically, we have these different parts in us. One part of us wants to hang out on the sofa and rest, and one part of us wants to be ambitious and do lots of cool things. And they conflict each other to the point where a lot of our inner turmoil is actually these parts sort of, fighting with each other. And everyone, I don't want to say everyone, but most people have this experience of one part being like, oh, why won't you blah, 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 like some part of themselves talking to themselves. This is a conflict of parts. So today what we're going to do is talk about teaching one of these more challenged parts how to ask for help, basically how to ask for not only how to ask, but how to ask in a way that it will actually receive what it needs. Because these different parts of ourselves are actually fundamentally, their sort of structure, I don't want to say their structure, but their entire role tends to be, I don't have what I need, please give it to me. And they're often just asking in the wrong place. And so there's this turmoil and they're fighting and they're like, give me the thing I need. Like, I need a sense of, connection. So I'm going to do that through eating donuts. It's like that's the sort of how well the logic of these various selves tend to work. So we're going to work on actually getting those selves to have their needs met. Good morning from Kingston, Ontario. Lovely to have you here with us, Rory. I like saying that. It's a fun name to say. So folks, finding that nice comfortable position that you can maintain for the duration of the sit. Oh, I want to try something here. This is something I was told that I could do. If I do this, it'll pick someone random from the chat and name you the winner. Okay, so who's the winner? All right, is it going to be you? The winner is... Wait, what? It always picks me. That's what I don't understand. Carl should move to Nickstad. That would be fun, or maybe not. Sela, the flying pupster. Let's see, first... Tomlin says, first month subscription to Twitch is 20% off. Oh yeah, Nick tried the winner thing. I don't know. Okay, I don't have it set up or something like that. I'm not sure. But whatever. That was something a feature someone told me existed. So our main support here is letting people know that if you want to subscribe, the first month is 20% off. Subscribing is a way of supporting the channel, supporting the live stream itself directly. And I always undersell the subscriptions because I'm always like, I always feel dodgy about it. Anyway, it definitely supports the stream. So, folks, what are we doing here? We meditate. So find a nice, comfortable position that you can maintain for the duration of the sit. Arranging the body well, arranging the knees lower than the hips. Actually, just to get us settled in, go ahead and do any stretching or movement you think would be helpful to allow the body to be still for the duration. These headphones make it impossible to stretch my arms appropriately. Loosen it up, shake it out. The Kobayashi shake, is that what his name is? And babe, will you mind caging the animal just because I'm going to record? I think Raquel has her soundproof headphones on so she can't hear anything I'm requesting, and the dog is about to start playing with the sound toy. I'm going to yell one more time. Nice. Okay, here we are. Excellent, folks. Here we go. Finding that nice, comfortable position. Thank you. And we'll begin. Beginning by taking a few comfortable deep breaths and just feeling the body rise and fall. Each time we arrive in a meditation, we arrive with the momentum of all of the previous moments. And a lot of this momentum is related to a need to do, a sense that we have something that needs to be accomplished, completed. There's somewhere to go, something to arrive at. And so while the body or the mind might pull us in this direction, I'd just like to state that there is no need in this moment. Nothing is being asked of us. We don't need to concentrate or meditate. We don't need to be. Being simply occurs. And some part of us may search for a way to make this moment different. Some part of us might be craving for something other than this particular experience. And that's fine, that's natural. We don't need to ignore it or push it away. We also don't need to engage in it. So whatever sense of asking is occurring, the system asking to have something be different, the system can ask, and we have no need to fulfill that request. Now let's bring the mind in contact with kind awareness. This is a little bit of doing, but see how little doing you can add. Simply knowing the experience. Subtly, gently knowing awareness and knowing the welcoming quality within awareness. Regardless of what sense data arises, letting it come in contact with this kind awareness. Playing with this edge of how little do we actually need to do. In order for our experience to be in contact with this kind awareness. And of course, distractions may arise. The mind may be pulled away at times, but this doesn't mean we need to effort more. It simply means that we're experiencing the nature of the mind. And sometimes part of that nature can involve kind awareness. So we're only responsible for when that's available. But when distraction arises and that's not available, that's not a problem. We'll simply begin again when distraction ends or we become conscious again. And now letting go of the kind awareness. This may appear in the background or may be stable and continuous, but we're not trying to attend to this for now. I'd like you to bring some attention to any challenged self, any easy to access self or part that has felt the challenge of existing lately, a bit of struggle. And as we touch into this, it can often feel a little surprising, different than the kind awareness. It's as though we're entering into the choppy water, the strange shape of a self. And that's fine. It's not a problem. Just bringing some attention or awareness to the experience of this particular self, where it is in the body, its general shape, location, the way it colors the world. We know its character well from having had many experiences from this selves perspective. And we may find that we're in contact with that self, that it is something we are observing or nearby, some part of our body or experience that's close but not very close. Or on the other hand, we may find that as we come close to this self, identification arises, and this part feels like us, feels like me at this moment. As though we're seeing through the eyes of this particular part. It can be helpful to know that we don't have to stay in this experience of identification. We can step out of it if we'd like at any point, ending the meditation if need be. And it can also be helpful to let this part know that this shape, this identification that can often feel a bit uncomfortable, that we'll only be here for a little while. We won't be stuck here. This is often one of the great fears and difficulties of any particular part, that it's stuck in its own universe. Often these parts don't know about our experience in meditation. So we're actually going to be guiding our own parts. We are the teacher today. And we're going to use our experience with meditation to teach this part, or this self, about the kind awareness. Being aware of any particular difficulty this part has in contacting that kind awareness. Sensitive to its fears. Often parts are nervous about looking outside of themselves. And also aware of any particular part's difficulties. Often parts are defined by their difficulties. This is the kind of ask, the craving or the aversion that's embedded seemingly permanently in the experience of this part. So what is it that we're teaching this part about meditation? We're teaching it how to make the exact request, the exact ask that it's been making this whole time that we know it from. The way in which this part has expressed longing for safety, to feel connected, feel heard, whatever its particular need is. We're here to teach it how to ask that question. So that the answer is the kind awareness. This part doesn't know that that's a possibility. And since we have experience with the part and with kind awareness, we can function as a kind of bridge. We don't need to search for the kind awareness or try to make the part feel it. We have it in our experience many times, having had contact with this kind awareness. Almost as though we're swaddling, wrapping this part, allowing it to rest, allowing it to come in contact with the kind awareness. And at first the contact points can feel foreign, like two magnets that won't meet, as though they're polar opposites. We can discover a sense of resistance between the kind awareness and the particular part. That's fine. Using the awareness to recognize that this is natural, this is part of the nature of this part. In effect, allowing the resistance. In effect, allowing the part of us that is resistant to the resistance. Being sure to check in with the body, seeing if there's any way that we could breathe or hold the body or adjust that would support this process of introducing the part to this kind awareness. And teaching the kind awareness how to ask its question. Teaching it how to open its leaves in order to find the sunlight. Knowing that it's in the nature of this part to seek support, to seek relief. And although it might be cautious and nervous at first, staying with the process to show it the level of relief that's available. Even the experience of identification, the part that feels like me, letting that too unfold in a way that opens it to the sunlight of the kind awareness. Again, no need to do, no need to change. We're simply introducing two natural elements and letting them find their way. Slowly, bit by bit, teaching the self that it can rely on, that it can let go into. That it can find refuge and home. That it can find all the care it's been looking for this entire time. Staying with the practice, staying in stillness. That's our goal, is to, over time, teach this part that it's safe to ask in this way, to have this interaction. We're going to make the adjustment, the slow transition from formal practice in a way that shows this part that safety. So allowing a tiny bit of light to enter the eyes. Eventually allowing the eyes to rest on a single point as they fully open. Noticing if the part has a different response to having the eyes open. If it retreats back to its habit of withdrawing. And know that that's okay too. Like any relationship, it simply takes time to build trust, to build rapport. And letting this particular moment be the great teacher, showing us how we can set in play the elements of nature in order to provide us deep and abiding relief in this moment and in every moment of our lives. Okay, folks. So making any adjustments you need to allow the body to be comfortable. So what was that experience like? What happened and what do you like now? So I'm going to put this in the chat, Rooney. Does it work? Yes, it does. This is the Zoom link. I encourage folks, if you, unless otherwise doesn't fit for you or is not your preference, to jump on the Zoom. Let me know when you do, because then I can jump on with you. The Zoom's not currently open. And that gives us a chance to speak. And often, I mean, from a teaching perspective, it is 10 times easier and richer to actually just speak and answer questions using voice. And that said, there's no pressure if you'd prefer to do your report or question in the form of typing. This is something we didn't get into today, and actually I want everyone to pause whatever you're doing, whether you're getting on Zoom or you're about to type. So if you're typing, pause. Here's what I want to encourage you to do. This is going to sound strange. Let the part use your, this is going to sound super weird, so I'm not to sound mystical or whatever. Let the part use your body, ventriloquize your body, and type or do whatever you need to do. Jump on Zoom, etc. Because the conduits that we are developing today is how to teach that part the spontaneous experience of existing in the world. In a way, it's like letting that part use its conduit of kind awareness to creatively manifest in the world. So go ahead, continue doing what you're doing, and if you can, let the system do it on its own. Let that part, in a sense, do it without trying to like overthink what it's doing. Just let it do its actions. It might come out a little clunkier than you're used to, but we're training something that is very important. If that sounds like mumbo jumbo, just ignore it. Ignore it and go ahead and like type your reports. So that meditation that we just did was a kind of breakthrough process for me pretty recently. Was this recognizing that I could teach the part itself how to ask its question, which its nature is its question. I'd like to zoom. Gene, okay. We're going to jump in here. Its question is its nature. It wants. I don't want to say like it's its only nature, because it often that question, that need, can actually be resolved. So here, let me jump on Zoom. But we're teaching that part. Beep up, beep up. We're teaching that part to ask its question in a way that will actually resolve the answer. and at some point it realizes, oh my goodness, like the part itself can have contact with this greater experience. Okay, so Jean, go ahead and jump on in. It doesn't say that you're here yet. There we go. Let me get this set up. So many windows. I'm not sure why Zoom requires like 10 different windows to be opened. It's an exaggeration. Okay. Oh, there we go. So, okay, it's just 1 second here. Oh my goodness. This is so funny. It's set up from okay, that's what I'm looking for. It's set up from when Aishin was here, so it's all different than. There we go. Okay. I'm starting to get the hang of this program. Okay. Jean, we're with you here. Oh wait, now I can't hear you though. Okay, so pro tip one, you're muted, but also make sure to mute the live stream so you're just coming through Zoom.
Yeah.
I see Lauren, you're here with us. I'm going to how should I do this? Actually, okay, I'm going to admit Lauren, and Lauren, just keep muted. Sorry, Lauren's just joining, so just keep muted for now. I'm going to talk to Jean for a sec, and then we'll go from there. Okay. Oh, see, it's doing some funny thing. Give me a second to fix this now that we have more folks joining in. Okay. Jean, you're with us. Please.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Let me just double check the audio is pumping. Go ahead, say something.
Okay. Here I am.
Yes. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I wanted to share some things quickly that have been sort of building up for me, and then I have a response to today's meditation.
Mm-hmm.
So generally, your comments about how one is sitting and having the hips elevated over the knees has been really helpful for me, because if I'm not sitting right, I tend to shift and stuff. And over the past few weeks, I've become more and more still, and it really feels very good. So thank you for that. And then also today, so the part that I was speaking with today or dealing with, that self is a recently kind of discovered self, or a self that I've sort of pointed out as being a worrier. Usually I'm very kind of easygoing and can be chill, but I have a tendency to sort of anticipate things that might go wrong. And that's often works out well for me, because if that thing does go wrong, then I'm already ready and I know exactly what I'll do and I take care of it. But I've noticed that part really goes on overdrive and tends to get never ends up happening. So I tried to sit with that self, and I came to a realization that self doesn't want to be caught seeming incapable.
Yeah.
So I think that's why it's always hyper vigilant. It's waiting for someone to judge it and say, knew all along, she can't hack it.
Yeah. Yeah, and so it sounds like you're saying that the form it takes is, so there's worry, right, sort of worrying, but underneath that is a fear of being judged. So this is part of the delayering process that we get to. Is at first we see the behavior of the part. Actually, at first we don't see anything. We just tell somebody to go fuck themselves. So we don't know. So then we actually eventually have contact. Okay, this is the part of me that does X. So you're saying this part has a lot of judgment, and tends to rather to worry. It's more of a worrier than a judger. It sounds like you're saying it's planning, going to resolve something in the future, and then it can be safe. And of course, like any part, it sort of doesn't know when it's needed and when it's not. It sort of is often there in the foreground before we sort of give it a sense of its sort of appropriate duty. Behind that is this piece of fear that's like, oh my God, there's judgment that could come in, and I better worry, or this judgment could come in. And I think that for me, what I found, and I'd be curious from your experience, that underneath the fear sometimes is a pain of having had that experience.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so in this layering process, part of it is to actually, for me at least, is to let the system experience and go through the pain of having had that experience, because otherwise it layers on top and becomes this, has this sort of a very funky dynamic.
Mm.
Yeah. So, but you were saying you were. I thought you were about to say something.
No, no, just I feel like in the past people have thought me incapable, and it certainly has had an impression on me.
Yeah.
But coming up in interesting ways now.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. I'm sorry to hear that that's an experience from your past. Um, yeah, because we embody that, and then it starts playing out in all of these subtle ways in our life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But I find that these type of meditations are wildly helpful for it. So thank you
So
very much.
cool. Awesome. Thank you so much. Awesome. Um, Lauren, I think you had a report or a question. And also, I just wanted to say thanks very much for um, coming on, Gene. It's not an easy thing to like exist in the world and like manifest in a way that's like more than our usual experience. So there's a lot of bravery, and it's a lot of basically, I'll tell you from the inside, is that people often report like, oh, this person came on and said something, it was really helpful. So just know that you're also helping support folks who might feel a little more nervous about potentially coming on or speaking in that way. So let's see here. Lauren is with us. So Lauren, do you have any question or report that you'd like to let us know about?
I joined Zoom because I didn't actually realize that the two systems integrated, which is very cool. But because I'm here, I will say something.
Please.
I think for me, it was difficult to like identify, right? There's like so many parts, and I think Jean's example was helpful of like the worrier. Like I
Mm-hmm.
think it would be helpful to hear kind of like what other people were thinking about and how they identified with that, just so I can like get a little bit more clarity next time I do something similar.
That's great. And so let me just make sure I understand the question exactly. You're saying what are the other kinds of parts that could come up? Is that
Correct.
yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, and so that's a process of self-discovery in part because so let's see here. Do you mind if I ask you a couple questions?
No, that's fine.
Okay, great. So let's see. Is there anything? Is there any place in your life that there is something you'd like to do that you haven't been able to so far?
Yeah, I'm sure there are many.
Let's pick one for a sec.
Okay. So like say
It doesn't have to be too personal. Don't worry. If you can pick, it can be something benign too. Like I want to clean my apartment more, and I don't, or whatever. It can be anything.
yeah. It could be like more experiences that are kind of disconnected from like technology and not looking at my phone as often and kind of like being able to take those breaks more like deeper and more consistently.
Great. Okay, so some part you have a part of you that's like I would love to just get the space and freedom that might come from not being so attached to my phone and attached to digital sort of technology and that kind of thing. Is that
Yeah.
right? Okay,
You
great.
got it.
So it sounds like there's a part of you that wants this, and yet there's a part of you that feels like that's not. It's just not happening right now. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, or there's so many things to balance. Correct.
Yeah. And so tell me about, and we don't have to go in major depth here, but we can just talk a little bit about it. The part that does, use social media, like social media, what does that part get from that experience? What are the benefits that part experiences?
I wouldn't say they're hugely beneficial. I mean, if anything, it's a way for me to barely be connected with other people on like not such a personal level.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd say if anything, I feel like a lot of them are more or negative. Right? It's just like, okay, this is time of my life that
Mm-hmm.
is wasted, and I'm not really seeing much benefit from it, and it's distracting. It's probably doing other negative things that I'm not even like aware of
Mm-hmm.
on the surface.
Yeah. And so it sounds like the voice that is stronger right now is the part that wants you to sort of step away from that would like you to that sees the negative side of what's happening there. Is that generally true? The voice is like, yeah, I don't see why this is the most important thing. This is actually maybe harming or just a pain in the ass or that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah. So, and again, we can keep going with this because it's, for me, this is super fun, but I also know that people have various levels of desires for self-disclosure. So,
No, I'm okay. It's good because it like challenges me.
okay, okay, great. Yeah, at any point, just say like, I'd prefer not to. So then in that case, it sounds like that the part of you that wants to look at the phone and that kind of thing, there's a sense of like it's you don't like it. It's annoying. It's frustrating. It's like you wish it would just get lost, sort of thing. Is that right?
Yes, I mean, not all. There's reasons that I have to do it and that it
Mm-hmm.
is beneficial, but like kind of just being aware of okay, which ones are actually helpful versus distractions.
Yeah. So I'll just zoom out a little bit. So right now we're describing there's a part of you that is using the cell phone or technology or social media, that kind of thing. And then part of you that's like, I'm not into this. I want this to be different. I want this to change. And P.S., this is a very common challenge that people are having. I have this to some degree too. I, find that I use social media to regulate emotion. I'm like, oh, I'm exhausted. I'm just gonna scroll and look at things and find out what's happening in the news. And it's gives a variety of like very mild dopamine or very mild like serotonin when I see that beautiful sunset or this kind of thing. That kind of thing. So this is a very common experience. So you have these two parts. Does that feel pretty solid for you, that experience?
Yeah.
That's pretty accurate. So in this process, this multiple part process, we can do a few things. We can hang out with either one of these parts. Oh, we have a new follow here from, I can't see it because it's covered up by my own text. Okay, it's in the wrong layer. Will somebody let me know who just followed? I'm not in charge of my own, like, okay, I'm going to put this alerts thing above this. Okay, I shouldn't have I shouldn't be responsible for this stuff. Okay, so thank you so much for the follow. I appreciate that. So we have these two parts: one that wants to watch, or use social media; one that feels like, man, that's such a pain in the ass. Like, so part of what we're doing in this process is just hanging out with, let's say, that part that is easier to connect with right now, that wants this other part to be different. Well, using basic, meditation theory, that experience right now of wanting that to be different is a sensory experience. It's somewhere in your senses. It's either seeing, hearing, or feeling, including, feeling, emotion, any mental imagery of what it's supposed to be like. Sometimes the mind will hold a shape, like it's supposed to be like this, and will sort of hold a thing. It's like, whatever it is. So whatever shape that is, if you can detect that drive right now, like I want this to be different, it might produce mental audio or mental visual activation, but generally the whole gestalt of all that stuff, we're going to call that the part for now. It's a little messy if you get into the details, but that's the part that wants that thing. That's the part that wants this thing to be different. And what's happening is you're having a colliding challenge with this other part that doesn't want it. Actually, it's like, I'm not interested in that, and I keep doing this thing even though you don't want me to. So part of the process ends up being discovering the need of that part that is pushing back. Because basically each part has a wholesome need or drive, but the problem is that its execution of that wholesome part or need or drive is often very problematic in our lives. So the example I always use is someone might feel like, I want to feel connected, I want to feel spiritual, I want to feel like, have all the energy in the world, and, I want to have a spiritual experience, right? Those are all fine, wholesome drives. However, if the choice to meet those drives is to use crack cocaine, like, oh, wait a minute, like something's gone wrong. So that drive has a need, and it's filling that need with social media. And so until you can find out what that part is up to, what it actually wants, it's going to be very hard to let that part let go of that behavior. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. And so often we can see one part much more clearly. You can see the part that wants you to change the behavior clearly, beautifully. So it sounds like, and we'll do a little process just so you can maybe have a little more contact with this other part. It sounds like there's some judgment that this part is like, I wish you were different. I wish this would change. I don't like this thing that you're doing. Is that about accurate?
Yes.
Yeah. So here's the question. I'd like you to check in with yourself in your body and your experience at this time. So I'm going to ask you a question, and the mind might answer in words, but we're not really looking so much for words yet. It might be fine, but right now I want you to check in with the body. And I want to ask this question. How does that part feel about being judged, about sounds like this other part is calling it kind of, worthless or annoying or frustrating? How does it feel being responded to in that way?
Let's see, my mind goes straight to words.
That's okay. We want to. Basically, it wants to be true for you versus the mind like coming up with a theory about psychology or something.
Yeah, I think on one hand, it's like, okay, this is negative. Is this actually useful? But on the other hand, I do think it's useful because otherwise, right, you would just keep doing it and not be aware of like, right, this may not be a positive thing for me. So I actually think it's good that I have that like check on it, as long as it's still like in a healthy way.
Okay, so what you're saying is may or may not be true, and I'm going to sort of dodge what you just said, which is not to say it's not valid in any way. I just want to sort of slide around and in a sense, re-ask the question in a different way. I just want to check in, how does that part feel about that judgment, about being judged?
I don't know how else to answer.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. And I might be asking the wrong question, honestly. It's not that you're doing anything wrong. So that is usually a way to sort of slide into a bit of empathy and say, like, typically a part is going to be like, I don't really like this. Like that's another way of asking the question. Does that part like the judgment? Does it like receiving being judged or sort of being thought of as less than? Because the sense is also that one part feels like it's better. You like this part. This other part, I don't like it. So is there any sense of how that part feels about being considered less than and being not liked? Again, if this doesn't rhyme for you, that's fine. It's just one strategy.
Yeah. I almost think it's helpful to have that, so that I can like correct the behavior. Like, is it a negative that I'm like thinking those things?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, but I would rather have them so that I can like change my behavior and maybe not spend as much time doing it moving forward.
Yeah. So, okay, there's a few things here.
I guess that's not really applying kindness so much, but
Well, here's the thing. There's a few possibilities. One of which is that it's just a behavior. It's not a part, right? Because we're talking about these as basically selves. Like there's these different selves within us using a sort of Buddhist cosmology or set of ideas. There's these different selves. One self wants this, one self wants that. It's totally possible it's just a behavior. It's just a thing that we're doing that is not actually linked to any particular self. If that's the case, then it doesn't matter. It's just like, it's like my tendency to, grab grab my matcha maker with my right hand and not my left hand, right? It's like, I don't have to ascribe that to a self necessarily. The other possibility, and we can pause here, but I want you to potentially leave a little space for this, is that if it is a self, then part of that self's view of the world is that it deserves to be judged, that it deserves to have that unkindness because it's just not worthwhile. Now, I'll just tell you from my experience, I absolutely have a part of me that feels like it's, that it's not worthy, that it's not worthwhile. And if it's like so like weak and pathetic and it can't get anything done. It's like, oh God, and its experience of the world is just like, oh my God, I can. It's like scared and it feels overwhelmed. And it's basically a very vulnerable part. And it has this sense of it could just disappear. Like, God, if I just didn't exist anymore, then everyone else could be happy and everything would go well. I could do anything I wanted, but this part is like so, scared or vulnerable. And it would, for me, that part in me, again, this is not saying this is the case for you. This is a possibility of the constellation. That part feels so unworthy, that it would happily take lots of abuse. Like, I deserve criticism, and I deserve, because like I just need to know how to either get smaller or stop existing, or sort of like suppress my existence in some way, and then finally everybody else in this system can like do all their ambitions and have all their sort of ways of being. So I won't press any further, because I don't think it's fruitful at this moment. And just to consider, it seems like it's one of those two possibilities. It's just a behavior, and hey, you just want to change the behavior, so basically go for it. However, especially if it's been something that's been intractable for a while, you've been wanting to do it but you can't, it's an indication that it might be a part. And part of the question is for you to over time begin to find the kernel of what that part is actually asking for. And if you can fill that need, it will no longer have a need to use social media or whatever to fulfill its need. And partially right now, the dynamic, again, this is assuming that it's a part, so please just cross this off if it feels like it doesn't work for you. The dynamic right now is that this part is valuable and this part is not valuable. So there's a little bit of the fight that's happening. I mean, my experience, I have the two big parts that are sort of prominent for me right now is a vulnerable part and a judging part that's like, you're not good enough. So if we have any sense that within us, like that we have a judging voice in us, it's like, God, why are you always so stupid, like this kind of thing, very common. It typically will indicate two parts, one part that is judging and one part that it is judging, right? And we've internalized these things. So as to look for, if we don't have a space for this part, because it's, again, we can dislike the behavior, but we want to be very kind and open to the part itself. As a huge constellation of thoughts of an approach, does that rhyme at all with your experience?
Yeah, it does. It's definitely, it would be helpful for me to like hear that, continue to think about this. It's a bit more complex than, again, I'm a beginner, so I'm just really
100%.
getting into this stuff. So I definitely need to think about it a little bit more slowly. But yes, like overall, that makes sense. I think it's a useful way to think about it. So I'll continue to do so.
Awesome. And I'm going to put a link here in the chat. So there's 3 links there. The bottom link is to our second YouTube channel where we have longer form content. And we have a playlist there called the Multiple Self Model. You can, it more explicitly goes through guided meditations on this exact topic. And what we're doing, the last 7 meditations in this series is part of this whole constellation. So this is a large set of meditations. We're actually probably at some point going to do an entire course on the multiple self model, which if it's helpful for reading purposes or searching purposes, it runs pretty parallel to, not exactly, but pretty parallel to internal family systems therapy. So you can search internal family systems and see kind of in to some degree what I'm talking about. But there are some differences in part. We use different terminology, but one of the things we're doing is this whole section now is about developing this kind awareness. So the last 7 live streams, give or take, were about developing a connection to this kind awareness. So they would be the introduction to this whole process. So, and I feel like you're in meditation detention right now. So I'm like, I gotta get you out of here. I gotta finish quick. So I'm just going. So, what I'll say is that each part, and this is why I like the self language. Each self only knows its own perspective. It only thinks this is the view of the world. And what's possible right now is that the self that is predominant is the one that wants the change. So it says, no, this is the view, and it doesn't care who's in its way. Even if the other part, this vulnerable part that is using social media, is actually like an expression of a 3-year-old you who feels vulnerable or something like this. They're often closely related to parts of us as very, very young children often. It doesn't care if it steps over anyone. It wants this thing. It wants to move forward. So each part has this view of reality that it is the one self. The funny thing is that no matter which self is in operation at any given moment, it tells the mind, I'm the one self. I'm the true self. So even if you check in right now with your experience and look around your environment, okay, this is the me. That self will tell you, I'm the one self. I've always been here. This is how reality is. even if that shifts over time, even if another self comes in, it's the hopeless self, like, oh God, like nothing will ever work and nothing I ever do, right? That's a very different worldview than you probably have at this moment. And yet that self also tells you, I'm the one self. I'm the only way that reality will be. So these selves can't by themselves navigate each other or see that there's a conflict or see that there's any sort of alternative other than their own view. However, we as humans have a potential to have contact with awareness, which awareness is basically the ability to, how do I describe this very simply? So the mind well, all right, I'm not going to get into to get into technicalities here, but we have this ability to be aware. Aware is just you're doing it in part right now. It's just the ability of the mind to know experiences. That awareness is incredibly neutral and can navigate any experience. It just knows. It just holds experiences, and it doesn't matter what they are. It's any experience is known through awareness, and that awareness can navigate between these parts and actually teach them how to communicate and show them. And this is what we did today. Show them that it's their deep desires to finally be free, basically to finally like, oh, I'm going crazy, please support me, help me, can be met through that awareness, that the awareness can actually provide everything they need. So anyway, that's a lot. I don't expect you to, to understand most of that. The point is that the multiple self model meditations are available, and the last 7 meditations in this live stream playbacks are also there, and they're ones with awareness in the title, and they'll sort of guide you through the beginning steps of this.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming on. Okay, so we have some comments here. Annie says, the part speaking, I don't want to be kind, I don't want to be kind because the world isn't kind. Okay, I don't want to be told anything because the other parts are naive, right? This is exactly what I described a second ago. This part, its own logic about the world, it has to have that logic be the logic. And if it tries to introduce someone else's logic, it's like, this isn't going to work. Kindness is for fools, right? So we now have an indication that this is a part that's protecting. This is very clear. It's like, no, this is bad. I'm going to, have this sort of wall. I have to push us forward to be successful in this world. I don't take any shit, and I'm the reason why we are surviving this long. And I think that's the thing that's tricky for folks, is that we're very good at black and white. We're very good at like, this is good, this is bad, this is right, this is wrong. This person is, on my political side, or they're an idiot, right? That's a very common sort of structure right now politically. And we're not good at nuance. We're not good at holding more than one perspective at once. And this is often because the part is like quite active. So it's challenging this idea that maybe this part is actually useful. So a second ago, we were just talking about this idea that that one part wants to make this change. Well, it doesn't mean that desire, there's anything wrong with that. The problem is that if that desire set sort of suppresses other parts and pushes their needs down. So when you're talking about this part, it's excellent to know that that's its drive, and to know that it doesn't mean it has to go away. Like that part of you that's like tough, and that part of you that like doesn't take any shit, like that's there's nothing wrong with that. The danger is when it goes outside of its needed range, and there's another part of you that's like, I need a break, or like I want to like connect with someone and like have a friendship, and that part's like, shut the we're going to do it, like that's when it becomes problematic. So that's great. That's really excellent clarity, and I appreciate just the clarity on that part. So one thing you'll find over time is that there is something that will meet that part's needs, some way of holding it in awareness, some set of words, something, and you can use your intuition because the awareness knows that's its nature. It knows experiences, so you can actually ask that awareness, like, hey, intuitively, what's the thing that would support and help this self be soothed? And the answer ends up being very intuitive, and it's also very direct. You ask that question, like, what would soothe this self? and you use that. Okay, maybe it's a phrase like, hey, I'm right here with you. And if you use that phrase in the mind and direct it toward that particular self, you'll see an instant response. It'll either be like, go to hell, or it'll be like, okay, and it'll calm down. So you have a very direct feedback loop in that way. So that's great, though. Thank you so much for sharing that. Moby D, Moby Dick, 000, asks, ever experienced ego death? So it seems strange because it's like, to be like, why, yes, I have. Everyone look at me. I'm the one on camera, and I've experienced ego death. It's like I'm the most humble person in the world. But the answer is yes, and the answer is it's not. It's not as uncommon as one might think. And actually, if you tune into your own experience, if maybe this is something you have experienced or maybe it hasn't, but anyone who has not experienced sort of noticeable, what we might call ego death, if we can just notice the strength of the ego over time and notice it fluctuating, it's getting stronger, it's sort of exerting itself. And I don't call it the ego, I call it self or selfing or identification. If we can observe identification breaking down, which it does frequently, I'm sure during this conversation or watching this at any point, you've zoomed into some window or piece of thing, you kind of zoomed into it and then came back. The interesting thing about the self, any self, is that it tells you it's always there. It's this sort of idea of like object permanence, where every time we look, that's one of these things that we learn as children. If every time we look at something, something is there. Okay, this is an object. I look away. Okay, it's still there. It probably was always here. That's a pretty solid, like, basic construct of object permanence, and that's something the mind learns. The self is very tricky because it's actually that's not the case. We look at the self and we're like, oh, it's present, and then we go observe and we soak into a flower, or we float in a pond, and or we like get in an argument, or we go to sleep even, right? We go to sleep, we're unconscious, we wake up, and this mind checks back and is like, do I have a self? Yep, it's right there. And so it assumes that it's permanent, and that's not true. And so we can start to observe the intensity of the self increasing and decreasing. Then we actually have a window into training the mind towards what you're describing as ego death. So folks, it has been a blast as always. Today is Monday, so that means something very special, which is that in fewer than 24 hours, we're going to be right back here having fun. Folks, I have a wish for you. This is a very particular wish for today. Today's special wish. It sounds like Mr. Rogers, but maybe it is. I was going to say it's not, but maybe it is Mr. Rogers. So my wish for you is simple. Just that in this particular moment, whatever self is arising, that we can have compassion for that particular self. That we can say, okay, I see you. You exist. At least in this moment, you're experienced as an existing force. And just have compassion for that self. Because often selves are there because they feel they have a need to exist. I must exist, or otherwise I'll be overwhelmed. Existing is so important to me. So just a compassion, and also a little compassion for how hard that self works. Even if we don't necessarily always need it to be asserting itself. Any one of these selves we've been talking about, just a little appreciation. Often these selves are very tired. So letting them know that even if they can't let go now, that at some point, they get a rest. They'll get a break. Thank goodness. So just going out into today, knowing that these parts are there to support you. Each one of these parts has some kind of protecting, caring, nurturing drive. A whole family of parts here to support you in different ways. So just feeling that support, feeling that solidity, even if it doesn't always go the way we want it to, even if it means we're staring at our phones more than we had planned. It's still a set of parts trying to protect us. So folks, have a lovely day. Take care of each other. Be well. And of course, as always, have fun. Okay, folks. Bye.